Here's a note on organic chemistry and biomolecules. Organic chemistry, as we've talked about before, is the study of all molecules that contain carbon atoms. So carbon is the central atom in molecules that are living or once were living at one time. The 6 most common elements in organic molecules or organic chemistry are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur, or for short, CHNOS. Here's the periodic table of elements where you can see the hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and phosphorus. So why is carbon so important? Well, it has the 4 valence electrons, so it can make 4 covalent bonds, which are strong. It can bond with hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and also itself. This gives carbon versatility and the ability to form long chains. And carbon-to-carbon bonds can be single bonds, double bonds, or triple covalent bonds, which you'll see by 1 dash, 2 dash, or 3 dashes between the carbons. Chains of carbon atoms can close and form ring structures. This makes carbon a versatile atom. So biomolecules, otherwise known as macromolecules, so the organic chemistry will focus on both the structure and the function of these 4 macromolecules. They include carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And we're going to really focus on the first 3. Nucleic acids are important. We have to know their function and their building blocks, a little bit about their structure, but we'll learn more details in quarter 3 about nucleic acids. Each category contains small molecules called monomers. So carbohydrate has a different monomer than a protein, and a protein has a different monomer than a lipid, etc. So you have to know what these monomers and building blocks are that join together to form the larger molecules called polymers. Note that there's only a few types of monomers, and that can lead to many different types of polymers. So carbohydrate, when you think of a carbohydrate, you can think of these pictures that I'm putting on the screen right now, including some bread, pasta, sugar. The cotton contains the cellulose, the starch that is stored in liver, and cellulose in paper as well. So different types of carbohydrates. Let's focus on the structure. You have to know structure and function, but the structure of a carbohydrate, it always contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and the ratio of carbon to hydrogen to oxygen is always 1 to 2 to 1. And so carbohydrate building blocks have a unique ring structure. They can be long chains, but they can also be ring structures like this one here, which is a glucose monomer or building block for a mono 1 saccharide sugar. So here's 1 saccharide, and if you link many of them together, you get a polysaccharide called a starch. So the types of carbohydrates, we've got a simple carbohydrate like a glucose or a galactose or a fructose. These are monomers or monosaccharides. They contain 1 sugar, and so they're their simplest form of carbohydrates. They're disaccharides are where you have 2 monomers linked together. So you have 2 sugar monomers here. So the di, 2 saccharides, 2 sugars. And the example could be sucrose, your table sugar. Alright, so complex carbohydrates are these polysaccharides. It's many sugar molecules linked together in long chains or rings. Examples would be glycogen stored in animals, starch found in plants, and cellulose found in plants as well. In a storage form of sugar in animals, we'll look at this liver first. So the excess glucose or monomers, monosaccharides, get stored as glycogen in the liver and muscle. So that's a form of a polysaccharide. It's many of the monosaccharides getting stored in the liver. The insulin, which is a hormone, triggers the release of the glycogen from the liver into the blood when glucose levels are low in the blood. So it plays a role in maintaining that energy flow. A storage form of sugar in plants and food reservoirs such as seeds and bulbs. So you'll find starch, that's the polysaccharide that you're going to find in these potatoes, cereals, pastas, breads, and rice. A structural form of sugar in plants is important because it gives it strength and rigidity, and it's found in the cell wall of all plants, the cellulose. When we study plant cells, we'll look at what that cellulose looks like in the cell wall, but the cellulose is indigestible, and it's known as fiber. So plants, fruits, wood, and paper have a lot of fiber, believe it or not. Here's cotton. Cotton contains cellulose in its cell walls. The function of carbohydrates is living things use carbs as their main source of energy, particularly simple sugars. They provide immediate, quick forms of energy, and complex carbs store extra sugar in living things. Lipids are a little bit different. Lipids can be found in these varying foods, which we'll take a look at as we go through the slideshow. So the structure of the lipid is off to the right here. It's also known as a triglyceride because it's a glycerol backbone with 1, 2, 3 fatty acid chains. And what you may remember is that lipids such as oil and butter, they are non-polar molecules. They do not mix with water. So, but you know it's a lipid by looking at its structure because of its glycerol backbone and its 1, 2, 3 fatty acid chains. These are long chains of carbon with hydrogens bonded to them. If it's saturated, then you'll see a double bond between 2 of the C's. If it's unsaturated, you will just see single bonding. So we have the glycerol backbone with 1, 2, 3 fatty acids. These are the monomers. Together, these are the building blocks for a lipid. Furthermore, on the structure, the types of lipid, the type of lipid depends on its fatty acid chain. So the saturated fatty acid chains are full. They contain the maximum number of hydrogen atoms, and there's just single bonding only between the carbon atoms. And for the unsaturated fatty acid chains, they are not full and they do not contain the maximum number of hydrogen atoms because the carbon atoms are joined by double bonds between at least a pair of carbon atoms, like shown right here. The saturated lipid, unsaturated lipid contains double bonds. So you may want to hit pause and label these on your lipid molecules on your handout. Types of lipids. Well, the lipids at room temperature that are liquid are unsaturated fats, including plant oils, olive oils, nuts, and fish. The types of lipids that are solid at room temperature we call saturated fats, and they are found in animal products and dairy and meats. Then there's trans fats, and these trans fats are artificial. This is done by the hydrogenating vegetable oil, and these are solid at room temperature and found in most processed foods. So the main function of lipids is very long energy storage, insulation, warmth or protection. They make up cell membranes, and they are protective waterproof coverings. So protection, insulation, and long-term energy. And then here are some examples of proteins, which are cheese, snails, hair, peanut butter, horns, meat, beans, etc. So proteins, we know we're looking at a protein. It's a large complex polymer made up of carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, and nitrogen. They can be 3D, form complex 3D structures. And the monomers and building blocks, the basic building unit of a protein is an amino acid. And here is one amino acid structure. This R will determine which amino acid it is. And so that R means variation. So this is the only thing that will vary. Okay. The NHH is always the amine group. and the C double bond OOH, the COO with an H group, is the carboxylic acid group. These will always be part of the amino acid. So again, we've got amino acid monomers, which contain carbons, hydrogens, and that R, which is the side chain, and that's the group that's different. That's the one that actually identifies. It's like the ID tag on an amino acid structure. There are only 20 common amino acids that make up all of the organisms in nature, and there are just infinite combinations of those 20 amino acids. So the function of the proteins, in addition to the structure, is there's a lot of functions actually. They're pretty important. Controls the rate of chemical reactions. We call these enzymes. We'll take a look at those. It helps proteins regulate cell processes. Hormones are proteins. They transport oxygen in the blood. Hemoglobin is a protein. And they help fight disease. Antibodies are proteins. So they're between regulating cell processes and transporting. There's a lot of functions proteins have. And finally, they form the bone, nails, horns, hair, and muscle because proteins are contained in the elastin, collagen, and keratin. These are different types of proteins. So here's the nucleic acid. It's the last macromolecule we're going to discuss, and you can see its appearance is similar to DNA molecule and nucleic acid. It's also a polymer. It's made up of C's and H's, O's, N's, and P's. The monomers, building blocks of nucleic acid, are nucleotides, and we're going to learn way more about this in genetics unit in quarter 3. There are 2 kinds: RNA, which is ribonucleic acid, and DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. The main function of these nucleic acids is to store and transmit hereditary information. Okay, and those are your notes on organic chemistry and biomolecules.